First of all, thanks for being here. You and I always have great conversation, right? It started with obviously us engaging and building that website for us. And I think that was one of the things that we had a website and it was okay. It was doing the job. But I think as you grow, your marketing strategy kind of have to change, right? And then one of the things I loved is that you came back and said, Sharif, you need to change your logo because our logo was crappy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And through that process, once we changed the logo, I think our website structure and design had changed so well. I think if I didn't listen to you, and if we went with that old logo, and even if we built the website, I don't think it would have flowed.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think now every documents that we're doing, now you're also helping building our capability statement and business cards. You also helped us structure this podcast. So I thought you would be an ideal candidate to have a conversation about digital marketing.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And thank you for having me.
So let's get an introduction first.
Sure. So, hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Cook-Raymond. I'm the president and CEO of Impact Marketing and Communications. We are a small woman-owned business consultancy. We provide integrated marketing communication services. So everything from website design, branding, like Sharif just mentioned, marketing communications collateral and strategy, social media strategy. We also do photography, videography, animation, writing and editing, sort of research translation, training technical assistance. And we also do like branding and marketing retreats and sort of, so everything's sort of full soup to nuts in the marketing communication space.
You don't not only help the businesses that are interested in going into federal sector, you also help federal agencies with their digital effort, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been around for over 25 years. And so we work as a federal contractor. We also work with state agencies and associations in the commercial space and also in the nonprofit space. And so for the federal government, a lot of our projects, we help develop both digital products and strategy, do health campaigns and other types of information and awareness campaigns, materials development, training TA, and other things kind of along those lines.
One of the things that I felt that I sort of struggled with when starting my business, initial stage of getting my name out, right? I mean, even now, if you think about it, like how many people really knows who I am or who iLinks is, right? But if I'm competing with Deloitte, right, whose name is there, they have a huge marketing team, has a huge business development team. When a small business is competing neck and neck to those companies, or let's say you are not competing against Deloitte, but you are competing against a smaller firm comparatively, $100 million plus, but you are still competing at the same level, or companies who has been around for a long time. How do you sort of help them strategize? Like, what are the things that a small business or even a mid-sized business whose name is not out there or who has been around, but they want to boost their name? Mm-hmm. Is there a strategy for it? Are there steps that they can follow, sort of how to get their name out?
Yeah, of course. Well, so, we always, when we work with an organization around kind of marketing strategy and certainly business development's a large piece of that, we sort of talk through kind of both what are their sort of short, medium, and long-term goals. There's a lot of ways to sort of build out that brand equity. So, of course, it's challenging if you don't have that sort of awareness yet. Sometimes I find that in the federal sector and sometimes the state, department kind of sector too, not the U.S. State Department, but like just state agencies. Sometimes it's helpful for folks to kind of get their foot in the door as a subcontractor, just to kind of build up some of that past performance, but also, assessing kind of are your rates competitive? Are there other kind of cross synergistic things competitively that you can speak to? Certainly in the federal space, people want to know that they're well taken care of, that you share a similar vision, and they want to have a real sense of kind of who you are. Ultimately, at the end of the day, whoever you're working with in whatever agency, everyone's human and they want to to enjoy the experience. They want it to be, you know, as easy of a process as possible. They want to know that they're well taken care of and that they're going to have a great product at the end of the day. And so part of it is really kind of how do you assure them that that's going to be you? And I think one place too is also being able to have kind of that past, not just performance, but also sort of collateral. So for example, iLinks, you know, you all work in a very sort of IT focused environment. And one thing that always surprises me a little bit, although I guess after 20 years in the space, I probably shouldn't be too surprised, is sort of the look and feel of so many IT agency websites and digital presence. Because really oftentimes IT is really more on the back end than the front end, but we're a very visual culture, you know, and that's only increasing even more so. And then at COVID-19, when we've all been stuck inside and really kind of in front of screens. So people really need to be captured kind of right away, not just like, oh, that's really visually appealing. That's very intriguing, but also really have a sense of kind of who you are. And so I also tell agencies to really think about, you know, their brand personality. So often people are working on kind of helping their clients look good and all of that. But then if you turn around and did kind of a marketing or branding retreat, you know, and asked everyone across the agency, you know, what is your, like, if you had to describe your company in, you know, 3 words, or, you know, you had an elevator pitch about your company or whatever it is, and for however many people you interviewed, you'd probably get a different answer across the board. And so I think a really important piece of marketing and branding is also making sure that, you know, everyone that represents your company, you know, is really clear on kind of your vision and mission, what their kind of key talking points and your unique differentiators are. And then if there is a brand personality, like, what is that? Is that, you know, sometimes it's easier for people to think about cars. Like if you say Volkswagen, that means something very different to you than Mercedes. Now they're both cars and they're both going to get you to the same place, and neither might be a wrong option, but one's going to say, you know, a certain thing about kind of, you know, like stability or and another's going to say something about kind of luxury. And so, you know, what are the phrases and terms? And then is the design that you have, your digital footprint, all of that kind of reinforcing that. And that'll give people a sense of kind of who you are as an agency and what they can expect you to bring to the table.
That's a good point. And then obviously your focus is digital marketing. So COVID probably has not impacted you as much. But if you are, or has it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think COVID's affected everyone. I mean, we work certainly in the digital space, but we also, you know, so there's still sometimes needs for, you know, traditional print materials or conference materials or, you know, other things that are sort of non-digital. But certainly, you know, more and more things have shifted digital. I think the biggest thing for us was just reimagining work as usual. So particularly in our like photo video space. So, you know, pre-COVID, typically we would actually go and have a in-person photo shoot. You know, we would, if somebody was close enough to us, we would like maybe interview them in person. If we were doing a video shoot, we would actually go and, you know, do video with folks. And with COVID, you know, that just wasn't feasible. And so we really had to pivot quickly, both to meet increased demands, but also in an environment that didn't sort of permit us to do business as usual. And so we had to figure out, how do we do virtual photo shoots? How do we do virtual video shoots? And then, but create a product that looks at just as commercially polished as it did when we could capture it in person. And so that's kind of been, I think, one of the big shifts. We've also seen an increase in kind of just the investments and kind of where people want to shift their marketing dollars, and realizing like, oh, you know, maybe people didn't want to have kind of a media buy, but now they do want to have paid search or, you know, a paid social media campaigns, or, you know, other of these spaces where some of our clients have reprioritized their own kind of spending patterns as well in light of COVID.
That's good though. And then is there things that you're seeing people sort of changing as far as post-COVID era, right? We don't know how long it's going to be. I mean, we're still going through it. We're still going through part of our shutdown or not. If someone is, you know, or heavily focused on marketing themselves in person, and they're trying to put a strategy together to be more digital focused, are there specific media or ways that they can do it? Are there specific social media they can focus on? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, well, the thing that's interesting about sort of marketing and digital versus in person is I always remind people that it's not about where you think people are, it's about where they actually are. And it's not about the trend. Like something might be super trendy. Like you might say, oh, like TikTok is just really blowing up here. Like maybe we should be on TikTok. I can't tell you how many times clients come to us and they want to be on the next, exciting thing. But the question is like, who are you really trying to reach? And is that where you can reach them? Like if you're trying to reach the federal government, like they're probably not on TikTok. And if they are, they're probably watching it, in their personal hours.
Sure.
If you're trying to reach health departments, they're probably blocked from all social media during work hours. And then when they're not in work, they probably are getting on social media from a personal account. So sometimes old school, emails, listservs, my gosh, like calling somebody on the phone, like sometimes there is a space for that. So I think it's always going back to who you're trying to reach, where are they, how do you get access to them in that space? And then I think that there's still nothing really supplants face-to-face, even though what face-to-face looks like in a virtual environment is a little different. Yeah. But there's nothing to say that you can't have like a 20-minute, virtual coffee date, or some other thing, or go around and do kind of a lunch and learn series. Like if you're a subject matter expert in something, you want to, say, I'm giving some free talks, do you know what I mean, for organizations that are looking to kind of learn more about this thing. You're giving a value add, agencies learn something, but you're also establishing yourself as a thought leader. Maybe you're recording it, so then you can also cross promote that on your digital channels. But it also creates and nurtures kind of a relationship and gets your foot in the door with an agency that maybe previously, wouldn't have had that connection. And you're at least having that virtual face-to-face. But it's couched under this fun kind of lunch and learn series. So I think that there's creative ways that you can think about it, but it all has to be driven by the audience.
I feel like marketing has gotten easier and less expensive with having social media and digital platform in access so easily, right? I think people are more open to responding to, if you send them a LinkedIn message or send them an email or tweet, people are probably more open to responding to that compared to finding time to meet person in time, the scheduling the time and hours and all of that stuff. I feel like these days it's easier, but you just have to be structured and have some strategy in a way. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, I think that there's definitely easier access to people because of all of the different social media channels. But I also think that sometimes it can be, there's so many people across so many channels. And so I still think that you have to be very just like diligent and mindful about who you're reaching out to and how. And it's not, and what is the ask? Do you know what I mean? Like, what are you hoping to get out of this relationship? And then I think, as you sort of think about that, you might not have a formal kind of CMS system where you can like manage and monitor like how frequently you're checking in with people, but at least having a list of kind of, these are the people that I'm trying to kind of connect with, or these are the agencies. This is how frequently I want to update them. And it could even be in like something as easy as a Excel sheet, but just kind of keeping track of it. So that way, whatever you're doing is still very strategic, no matter which kind of platform you're reaching out to them on. One thing that I am seeing a lot more of, with that sort of creating both kind of synergistic relationships with like-minded agencies while also creating a lot of sort of promotional opportunities online, are a lot more like panel and roundtable discussions. So, finding a topic so like digital marketing during the COVID era, and then myself and several other people might get together, and some of us might know each other and some of us might not. And it's a great opportunity to kind of collaborate and connect with each other. But then, we're able to share information out more publicly. It's a great marketing opportunity. And it's, just an hour or two, of our time kind of, to kind of participate in that type of event. So I think sometimes like the thinking is not just how do I reach out to people on digital, but also, are there other opportunities that I can get my name out there in a sort of value add thought leadership way that will help drive traffic. And if you're looking and thinking, oh, well, I want to do that type of roundtable discussion, but we don't have a lot of people to market it to, well, then invite the influencers. So who are the other people in your space who do have those kind of larger social media followings, or the really big listservs or whatever that can get those people in the door? And then, but then your brand, is also going to get exposed to their audiences as well.
And then on the flip side, federal agency, you work with state, local, federal agencies and stuff,
Yes.
right? There's so many different companies. You have been able to, sort of navigate through and get your name there. I think getting into government agency is hard, right? And give me a little bit of history of how did you get started and how were you able to penetrate into this market?
Yeah. So how we got started is actually kind of an interesting story. So our founder actually originally wrote some of the first 1986 AIDS service demonstration grants, which were the precursor to what's now known as the Ryan White HIV/AIDS program. And so really some of the work that even predates our incorporation was related to helping health departments reply to some of the first federal grants in HIV. And then he was housed as an independent contractor within one of the federal buildings up in Rockville. And then in the mid-90s, spun off and formally incorporated impact marketing and communication. So we've always kind of, since our inception, we've had a close relationship with a federal agency, but then kind of from a growth structure, looking at, okay, the work that we did within that agency, there's a lot of cross synergistic skills that other agencies would be really beneficial within other agencies. And so looking at, well, what are the other bureaus and agencies within that umbrella? Where are there groups that are kind of embedded into other federal agencies or departments that we could maybe first get in as a sub, leveraging the experience we have, help them, especially with some of our larger business partners, where we can help them check off that small business mark, that woman-owned small business mark, even that economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business mark. And so it's a win-win because they know that they have someone with proven experience. They're able, we're able to fill certain niches within those proposals, and then they're able to check off those boxes with small businesses. But I do think sometimes too, not only is it advantageous for smalls to connect with some large businesses and really kind of nurture some of those relationships, but also sometimes I think the small, like other smalls collaborating together also makes for a really competitive application. And so I think it's, even when you're not looking at a very specific procurement, building those relationships with groups that you can really see oh, well, maybe they don't really do that marketing communications piece, but they do a lot of, training and technical assistance. And a lot of times you need to tell people while there's trainings happening. So maybe they're doing a lot of research, but then you need to tell people, well, what are the outcomes of those research? Well, we can help share the outcomes and do the dissemination piece. So where are those pieces of the puzzle that tend to typically get put together? And then which piece do you represent and who else might be able to shore that up and kind of finding those relationships? And so that's one of the ways that we oftentimes sort of tackle business development, kind of how we first got our feet wet, I guess you could say. Yeah.
Yeah. The relationship is such a key in this business, right? It's
Absolutely
amazing. It's amazing, right? I wish that somebody told me this 20 years ago. Yeah, I think I would have kept in touch with everybody I met, because at the end of the day, people want to work with who they're comfortable with, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, who they're comfortable with, and then who, again, makes life easy for. Right. So it's if I know I can hand this piece off to you and I can trust you and you can run with it and do great and help us all collectively look great in front of the client, that's a win-win. Yeah. And so, I think that, and that's the other piece too. I tell folks, on their websites, it helps with analytic ratings to have third-party testimonials. Also, if folks don't know you, to just hear from other, third parties about kind of the great work that you do and how reliable you are and kind of all of these other things. Because it's one thing for you to say, oh, we're really great, but it's another thing for someone else to say it. So I think testimonials can go far as well. And sometimes we'll even put them into some of our proposals just to add a little bit of extra flair about a particular project.
And when it comes to searching for business now, on the other side, when you are looking for business, do you spend a lot of time putting a strategy together? I've seen both. I've seen some companies who just goes after everything, right? And they're playing a number game. But at the same time, I've seen on the other side, as you mature, you start to put a really good amount of strategy together, put amount of time to actually figure out what and where you're trying to target and which agency you're trying to get to. If this is a new agency that you want to target, are there specific strategy you put if you are trying to penetrate into a new market?
Yeah, so we're probably closer to the latter. So we definitely, I think as a small business, you also have to be mindful of your staff time and right. or kind of the finances that you've set aside for kind of business development. And so sometimes it can be cost prohibitive too for a small business to go after everything, because, that's a lot of hours that you could otherwise be spending on direct billables, and so we do try to be very strategic and mindful on kind of tracking different opportunities well in advance, identifying those agencies and niches that are the most synergistic to our current work, as well as kind of, I guess sort of the next door neighbor. Do you know what I mean? Like very close, where it would be a kind of easy and obvious fit for us to kind of slide over into it. And then we also have a number of different ways that we track kind of new things that drop. So, and sometimes, again, we work both in the federal space, state space, commercial and nonprofit. So beyond just kind of, tracking federal work, we also have a lot of vehicles where we're tracking other RFPs that might drop in the commercial or nonprofit space. We're also on a number of state listservs where information might come out. We're also registered. So we have offices both in the DC area and in New York. And so, for example, in New York, like we're already registered, in their system as a woman-owned small business. And, so anyone looking for a woman-owned small business, or for RFPs that drop that are earmarked specifically for either minority or woman-owned small businesses, we're on the list that receives that. So that also helps us kind of go through our different procurement opportunities as well. And then sometimes, the best business is your current business. So not only keeping current clients happy, but also are there other things that would be advantageous for them that you can bring to the table? Like, it's great that we did this, but like, have you thought about this, right. Or what have you? Because sometimes additional funds free up. I mean, not always, but sometimes, whether it's, like additional federal funds or, certain programs didn't spend their full budgets and monies get shifted around. So sometimes if there's ideas that, that people really like, and you've already kind of nurtured those ideas, then sometimes that can turn into opportunities too.
And how important is having a solid capability statement? I remember one of the things when I first started, because my background was in private sector. Mm-hmm. And then when I started more in the state local agency. And state local, I didn't really feel the need of, I think it was less formal than federal. Yeah. And I remember very first time I went to federal agency, and first thing they asked for is my NAICS code, a capability statement. My business card didn't really have all of that. And I remember I had this conversation yesterday with somebody, actually. I remember coming back and quickly changing those. So if somebody is going into a federal agency, what are the basically bells and whistles when it comes to marketing goals? Is there specific things that they really need to have it tidied up before approaching? Is there any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, the capability statement is kind of more, it sort of more lives and breathes in the federal space.
Like I think
that's, yeah. And so, but you're right. I mean, so I think if you're building out a capability statement, I mean, obviously it has to have your contact information, your NAICS codes, your DUNS number. And then I always like to recommend, at least at sort of the first page, at minimum, you would have sort of a 1-page capability statement to really highlight, like, what are those key sort of areas, and then any innovations you have. Our capability statement also has at the bottom kind of a few sample clients. So if you have clients that either are in the federal space or highly synergistic, sometimes that's really helpful, kind of at a glance. Folks like to know, how long you've been around, or if you're, we have great CPAR evaluations, or whether they can look up those CPAR evaluations. But then what we have done in the past on some occasions, especially when we're going in to actually like meet with a federal officer or small business rep, is have different variations of our capability statement. So the front is the same on all of them, but the back might have like, 2 different sort of mini case studies or spotlights about some projects that, like, here, what's this federal agency was struggling with this challenge. Here's what we did, and here's the outcome. And then the bottom half, and one might be focused on healthcare, one might be focused more on IT, one might be focused more on, something else. And so we know if we're going into HHS, we're going to grab the one, that's the healthcare focus. Yeah. If we're just going into a general kind of small business conference, where there's folks from all across the board, we'll just have that general 1-pager that, is kind of universal for everyone. So, but I do think it's important It's interesting. I think that when you're first meeting people and you're kind of the new kid in the room or at the table, and sometimes you could be around for 25 years, but it's an agency you haven't worked with, so you're still the new kid again. And so that capability statement is really important. But I think also like following up, doing some follow-up too, making sure you do your research before you ever sit down and meet with that person, to hand them that capability statement. So that's always important. You don't want to ask questions that are already available online, and then kind of not make that show that you haven't done your research, because then that gives the impression that you're not that serious. But then I think like once you're kind of a known entity, I think the capability statement kind of takes a little bit of more of a backseat, because they already know you, and so they know what you're capable of. And then it's just about kind of continuing to nurture those relationships.
So changing gear, obviously you have a business that's growing, but you're also maintaining a family. Yes. How do you manage that balance between raising kids, having a family, and also being active? It depends on different types of businesses, right? When your business is all about being upfront, right? Mm-hmm. Being on the front line, digital marketing, you are the one who is actually helping other people coming up with the strategy to be on the front line. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like you have to be visible all the time. So how do you find the balance between the two?
Yeah, well, so I think so the week before I became a mother for the first time, I read this wonderful article, and I think it was in the New Yorker, but I'd have to dig it up. But it said this wonderful statement that has stayed with me today, which is that, Americans kind of have this whole idea of work-life balance all wrong, because we think that everything has to be balanced, but realistically, life is not very balanced. Like some days work demands more of your time and attention. And so, for example, if you're working on a federal proposal and it's due tomorrow, you need to really buckle down and spend a lot of time and attention to that. And other days, your family demands more of your time. You have a sick child or some other thing. So every day, so it's sort of a crushing litmus test or pressure if you think every day has to be exactly balanced. But if you give yourself the freedom to understand that in the end, when it all shakes out, the goal is for it to be balanced, but sometimes different parts of your life are going to demand more or less attention. I think that frees you up a little bit to be able to recognize kind of when there's very specific priorities. I don't think I'd be able to do kind of all that I do without sort of the support of a wonderful spouse who is very understanding that I'm a business owner and busy. And then sometimes I just have to get online after my children go to sleep because they're both very young. But yeah, I mean, I've always been very involved. I played college soccer and worked a part-time job and graduated first in my major, and so, I always just was very scheduled. And I think that just scheduling your time and realizing you can only really do one thing at a time, and just taking a step back and saying, okay, what's the most pressing thing I need to pay attention to now? And then kind of, focusing on that. And then certainly as we're growing, also just doing a really good job of delegating, training staff, and then delegating things that don't have to be done by you and really can be done by your wonderful staff.
I think you mentioned two key points, right? One is that sort of like prioritizing and giving yourself flexibility. Mm-hmm. And not be too hard on yourself if every day is not the same.
Yeah.
Right. There's going to be ups and downs. And if you are sort of like go easy on yourself, that you haven't been able to do 100% perfect every day, I think that makes it a little bit easier, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then the second point is the partnership. I think that's very important too. I think that usually you don't hear it until you grow up. Then you start to realize how important it is, right? Now looking back, when I think about it, when you're picking a partner, it's the biggest decision in your life, right?
Absolutely.
How quickly some people jumps in and then kind of like figure it out 20 years later, right? I think building a business, you're going to have such hard days sometimes. It's almost like anybody who's building a business is built in a certain way. Like you were mentioning the fact that you've always had some sort of structure. You've always been able to manage time. But if you are not able to manage time properly, if you're not able to sort of juggle multiple things, I think it can be difficult to grow a business and have a family, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But again, I think that's also where, I've just been really blessed. Like we every client we work with, everyone on my staff is just absolutely phenomenal. And I actually say before I hire, and I'm not joking about this, every person we hire, I tell them, I'm like, I'm a soccer player by trade and team chemistry is really important to me. And so like, you could be an all-star, but I played with some all-stars and they were not very good teammates, you know? And so it's like, we're all in this together. Do you know what I mean? We all have sort of a shared goal here, but we all have to spend so much time together too. You know, like every moment I'm not with my family, I'm at work, you know? And so you also really want to enjoy the work that you do and the people that you're doing it with. And so I think that helps too, when when you are prioritizing all of those things with work, that you're doing it with people that you feel like have that shared vision and are really sort of coming, like, bringing their best to the table, and together you're all able to bring your best as well.
And I think it's also like who you are as a person sort of reflect, right? You are very friendly.
Thank you.
So it makes it easier to work with you. So I think when you have that sort of personality, you attract similar type of people too.
Absolutely.
Right? If you look around your circle of people, if they're all crappy, you're doing something wrong. Maybe you need to change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?